Hello and welcome to the module on reporting and documentation. The learning objectives of this lecture are: firstly, to help the learner understand the basic features of reporting, specifically the use of annual reports. Secondly, to develop an understanding of other forms of reports such as performance report and financial audit reports. Thirdly, to provide a basic overview about documentation and the role of documentation units in social welfare or NGOs. Finally, to help the learner understand the use of participatory documentation projects which social welfare agencies and social workers can take up. As you all know, reporting and documentation play an important role in effective functioning of NGOs, voluntary organizations, CBOs and CSR departments. It helps in sharing the project outcome with donors, support agencies, government functionaries, well-wishers and like-minded people. An effective reporting and documentation system will help the organization to enhance its image among its stakeholders. It also enhances the credibility of the organization in the society. We will deal on all these aspects in this module. Okay, let's start with a question. What is reporting? Yes, reporting in simple words is the communication of achievements and the area of improvement alike to the concerned stakeholders, namely the governing board members, staff, clients, community members, donors, government and others. There are two types of reporting, namely internal reporting and public reporting. Internal reporting involves collecting information for internal use. These reports are not designed to be made public and may also have some confidential information. These reports can discuss efficiency, job performance and other aspects of employee activity which may be of concern to that organization. Many organizations support whistleblowing activity and encourage their employees to file reports if they suspect any activities which may violate the law of the country or organizational policy. For instance, an accountant could express concern about the financial report of any branch of the organization, or an employee may report a staff who may be misbehaving. Many scholars argue that the explicit public nature of non-profit action and the tax subsidy to the voluntary sector as such invites public reporting of the performance to the government and the citizens. So, for example, in the corporate sector, various public reporting initiatives have begun. These reports are normally called the annual report or the sustainability reports. We will now discuss on annual report in the context of NGOs and social welfare organizations. In fact, in India, trusts and societies are not required by law to produce annual reports. NGOs which are registered under Section 25 of Companies Act are required to publish annual reports. However, organizations that desire to practice norms of accountability and transparency should make it as a policy and norm to regularly come out with annual reports for the corresponding financial year within 8 months of the end of the financial year. The annual reports should be widely disseminated to stakeholders and be available in public domain. Annual reports should clearly describe what the organization is trying to accomplish and what are its strategies for making that happen. It should also list the organization's capabilities for achieving its mission and state its objectives and how it measures its progress. Thus, the annual report gives a broad overview of what the organization has accomplished during a particular year. It is essential for the organization to also provide a summarized financial statement for the year, which includes balance sheet, income and expenditure statement and receipts and payments account. It is advised to present a summary of the organization along with the audited accounts. Now we will look into the components of annual report. Annual reports are used to review the work of the organization during the past year. It also in general has these following components. First, it starts with a brief overview of the organization. It describes the major objectives of the organization. It also talks about the vision and the major activities undertaken by the organization in a particular year. On the first page of the annual report, a welcome note of the project director or the president of the organization can be given. In the next 5 to 8 pages, details of the programs conducted or organized by the organization in that particular year can be given. Some statistical highlights can also be included in this. Then the financial statement of the organizations can follow. A page can be completely devoted on the governing board and the legal status of the organization. In recent years, to have more credibility and accountability, details of staff salary is also given in the annual report. The final page before the cover page should contain information of all the donors. Other than the annual report, there are other forms of reports, but we will restrict to two of the important internal and external reports in this lecture, namely the performance audit report and the financial audit report. Performance audits. Performance audit refers to the examination of a program, function, operation or the management systems and procedures of a NGO or a social welfare organization. It is done to access and assess whether the agency is achieving economy, efficiency and effectiveness in the employment of available resources. So, performance audit report embraces three aspects. First, audit of economy of the administrative activities in accordance with sound administrative principles and practices. 2. Audit of efficiency in utilization of human, financial and other resources, including examination of information systems, performance measures and monitoring arrangements and procedures followed by audited entities for remedifying identified deficiencies. Thirdly, audit of effectiveness of performance in relation to achievement of the objectives and overall audited entity. Second type of report is financial audit report. Financial audit is a process of verification of the financial statement of the organization with a view to express an audit opinion. The audit opinion is intended to provide reasonable assurance that the financial statements are presented fairly and in accordance with the financial reporting frameworks. The purpose of a financial audit report is also to provide an objective and independent examination of the financial statements, which increases the value and credibility of the financial statements produced by the management. Thus, it increases the stakeholder confidence in the financial statement. I hope you understood about the reporting aspects. Now, we will move to the next part of this lecture, which is about documentation. The term documentation is closely related to documentation science or information science. Documentation is a process of documenting knowledge and providing evidence. Documentation includes both archiving information, namely the project report or technical reports, as well as first hand writing of the process happening in the field. A documentation unit or a documentation center is the part of an organization which archives information and supports the work of the organization. Documentation centers provide services to the staff and other external users. There are 7 phases that should be followed when setting up a documentation unit. They are collection of organizational information, collection of information about available resources, identification of user groups, analysis, decision making, start of the practical work and following up. Documentation center can carry out process documentation, monitoring and impact assessment of the programs. It can also bring out the annual reports, brochures and information leaflet of the organization. The center can also function as a reading library for social activists, academicians and volunteers. A person in the organization with a good blend in communication can be identified as a documentation unit leader. In bigger organizations, a specialist can be hired for the role of documentation and research. Process documentation is one of the important techniques of documentation of the work of the organization in the field. Process documentation is an applied practice-based research method of finding occurrences of similar events or deviations in an ongoing manner. The term was first used in 1978 in Philippines to refer to a method adopted by a group of social scientists who stayed in project villages and made detailed observation and documented the process of user group formation and functioning. Today, the term process documentation is widely used in social development projects across the globe. In process documentation, the following sources of methods are used, namely records, structured interviews, case studies, field diaries, video and audio recordings, newspaper clippings and participant observation methods. According to Dr. Rajesh Tandon, 5 steps are to be followed in undertaking a process documentation exercise. They are familiarization and rapport building, establishing the focus of process documentation and developing the frame of reference, facilitating the process of documentation, review of the process documentation exercise and closure. Through process documentation, the work of the social welfare agency in the community can be professionally documented. This serves as an important source of evidence for further intervention in the field. In the recent past, many agencies have started to use participatory methods for documenting the impact of their work. This is called participatory documentation. Some of the characteristics of participatory documentation methodology are that people are the subject of research, there is no dichotomy between the subject and object of research, people themselves collect, process and analyze data using simple methods, and finally, the knowledge generated belongs to the people and is used to further promote action in the community. So, there is an inbuilt authenticity and genuineness of information because people themselves use the data. Some of the innovative tools used for documentation in this methodology includes participatory photo documentation, community radio production, participatory video production, etc. Participatory photo documentation and community radio production has been in practice for quite some time in the development sector. In recent times, participatory video documentation has become immensely popular. Participatory video documentation is helpful in documenting how the initiative was implemented and what are the implications of such intervention. People make their own video and make their own interpretation of the source. Thus, it provides an opportunity for the local people to document their own experiences and knowledge. 4-stage process is followed in the participatory video production exercise. Firstly, the facilitator helps the local people to learn the use of video equipments and to identify the issues. Secondly, the video product is directed by the people. Thirdly, dynamic exchange of ideas takes place in the process. Finally, the completed videos are kept for reference in the documentation unit. The participatory documentation indeed gives more credibility to the work of the organization. Now we come to the end of this lecture. Let's do a small recap. Reporting is the communication of achievements and areas of improvement alike to the concerned stakeholders. The two types of reporting are intra-organizational reporting and public reporting. Annual report is the important form of public reporting. Both process documentation and participatory documentation are important ways of documentation of the work, which helps in gaining credibility among stakeholders. Thank you for listening. See you in the next module.